let's get started with how do we do some shortcuts within Gmail. I've been talking about them repeatedly throughout these tutorials, but let's actually execute on a few of them right now and take a look at some of the most common shortcuts out there. Before you can even do a shortcut, let me just remind you that you have to go into Settings, drill down into Settings, into the General area, and then keyboard shortcuts right here. By default, again, are off. This time we want them on, and we save the changes at the very bottom and back to our compose. And now we can compose or do a bunch of different things based on keyboard shortcuts. To show you some of the options here, I'm just going to bring you to this web page and we can zoom in and take a look. To compose, if all I do is hit the letter C while I'm in my mail, it's going to open up the compose window. If I want to search something, I just hit the /. If I want to move to a newer conversation, K, older, J. I think you get the idea. You just scroll down here, and these are all of the different functions with the keyboard shortcut in mind, and there's a brief description over on the right-hand side that tells you approximately what it does. So I'm going to come back to my mail account here now, and I'm just going to hit the letter C, and you're going to see right here a new message popped up. I'll close this message. Unfortunately, that put a draft over here, so if you accidentally hit C all the time, you might end up with a whole ton of drafts that you're going to need to delete later. But the best one of all is the search piece. So if you want to, the question mark button or the / button right next to the shift key on most keyboards, if you hit that, it jumps you up to your search terms, and you can begin searching for whatever. In fact, if you haven't caught this already, you can search things according to, so you could say, was it to me, to do for com, or was it to Joseph Dufour, or was it to one of those silly addresses that we were talking about before, do.for.com. Remember one of the junk email address that I give out to people, and I even have a filter for it, but I want to find any email that's ever come to that address, so I can search for. I can even look for from if I want to, by doing from, and then deciding whether it was from Bill or Stacy or Jim. One of my favorites for searching though is this. I could say it's from Bill and has, that's what the has is for, attachment. See how it pre-populates right there? So now this is going to give me anything from Bill that has an attachment, which is extremely, extremely nice, because at least for me, I remember that fairly often, whether or not something that I'm looking for from someone had a PDF attachment or a Word document attachment to it. And it really helps me thin things out. And again, just in case you've forgotten, use the drop down right here to take a look at some of these built-in search tool pieces in case you can't remember them, but there are some shortcuts by just typing in some of those words. So that's shortcuts in a nutshell, and all you really need to do is take a look through this list, see which ones would make sense to you, decide whether or not you want them on or off, and then try them. That's it. Let's move on to the most intriguing and probably the most fun part of Gmail, and that is labs. Labs are all over most Google things. Within Google Apps, you can add on labs, and labs are just little plugins or little things that you can add to Gmail that allow you to either do fancy things, help you organize stuff, or they might just give you better bells and whistles to work with within Gmail. But right here, if you see third from right here, right next to offline, and actually I'm going to speak 5 seconds about offline here just before we go over to labs. So offline is a way to actually install Gmail offline, which means that you can get to your mail, most of it, even if you're not connected to the internet. It doesn't mean that you can send stuff to people, even if you're not connected, but it just means that all the stuff that you've had so far will be available, and you can even compose emails and all of those things, but you won't be able to send them until you get back connected on the internet, obviously. If you click this button right here, it brings you to the Chrome web store that looks a lot like this. You can then install Gmail offline, but the catch here in all of this is that you are going to have Chrome. And so when you load Chrome, you can see I already have it installed right here. Here's my Gmail offline installed right within my Chrome browser. And that's going to come in a few videos later about how to use Chrome, how to add and install things within the Chrome browser, but those of you who are far ahead of the curve could certainly jump into this and take a look at Gmail offline. Back to Labs. Labs is right next to offline. Click on that, and now you're going to see a whole slew of plugins, additions, or whatever you want to call them, right down the middle. You're going to also notice that I have a few enabled, and yours is not going to look exactly like mine because once you enable a lab, it rises to the top. So all the ones that I have enabled are up here at the top. And I want you to just take a look through this and find which ones you think would work for you, except I have a list of ones that I highly, highly recommend. First one is app search. That means once you start using Google Docs, Google Apps, you can search for your apps right inside of Gmail. And I'm going to show you what that means here in just 1 second by doing this. I'm going to disable this instead of enable it. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. I'm going to hit Save Changes. And now it's going to reload, rather, my account here. And I'm going to look up stuff for my Google Education Summit, GES. And you're going to see only one single email right here from myself about the Google Education Summit. But I actually wanted to look for documents. So now, if I come back into Settings, and I turn that lab item back on, and I'm not going to go looking around for it all over the place in here, although I did just see it right here. Instead, I'm going to go up to the search tool up here and just look up apps. It floats to the top. I can enable it this time. Run down to the bottom, hit Save Changes. It'll reload one last time here. And I'm going to search the same exact thing. And remember, I have that shortcut enabled, so I just hit that /, jumps up to that search bar, hit GES, hit enter, and watch this. Instead of getting just an email up here at the top, which I did, I still got that email, I got all of the documents that are associated in my Google Drive account with this Gmail account that have the words or letters GES in them. It's a remarkably nice tool if you're an apps user, and I'm sure many of you are. I'm going to go back into settings now, back to labs, and showcase the last couple of labs that I insist you use. One is canned responses, and we're actually going to cover that one at the very end because that's the most complicated one, but it is probably the most powerful one. But go ahead and enable that. Find the undo send. That is everyone's favorite, and it is so simple. It's a no-brainer. It gives you 30 seconds, I believe, to just hit cancel after sending, or to hit undo. Don't send that. And all of us have been there. All of us have wanted to undo. Well, this gives you that brief little oopsie-daisy time where you can undo or cancel an unintended email. Next one is unread message icon. I'm going to showcase that one right now because it's extremely easy to do that. Look up here in my tabs. This email has unread message icon listed in it. And you can see the tiny little number 9 there, which means that if my tabs are closed up really tight, I can still see how many unread items I have in this mail account, which are 9. Over here I don't have that same thing running, but if I hover over it, it'll tell me there's 8. But I can't see it at a snapshot. I can't see a number underneath the mail icon. I really like that one. It seems to be easy to use, and I really like being able to see at a glance what there is and what I can assume is going to be in my inbox when I get to my email. So those are the 4 that I highly recommend that you use. And I went over this bottom one, unread. I went over undo. It's just that easy. And the last one actually is the canned responses because I did go over the app search already. So I have canned responses, and we're going to dive into that one right now. After you enable all the ones that I told you to enable, scroll down to the bottom, make sure you hit Save Changes, and it will bring you back to your inbox after reloading. And we're going to take a look at canned responses. And I'm going to have to show you from the 2 different composition styles. Remember that full screen compose and the small screen compose? They each use canned responses, but to get to them is slightly different. So I'm going to show you first from the old style compose what it looks like. Here I am in the old compose version, and you can see right here canned responses is listed as an option just underneath the subject line. It is that easy. And you're going to see all of my canned responses. I have a crazy number of them. And we'll come back to this as a showcase, as an example of how or why you might use canned responses. But now I'm going to go back to the new version of Compose and show you how to get to canned responses from there. Canned responses from here is not quite as easy as it was in the old style, but it's still there. So I'm composing, and if I want to use a canned response, I just have to hit this more button right here, the more options button in the bottom corner, and now canned responses is right here. And you can see I have absolutely no canned responses, probably like most of you. And so we're going to start here together and build from here together. But first I'm going to show you why you might want to make them by showcasing the old version that I have back here. Canned responses works like this. If you want to email somebody, if you want to do a form letter, let's say for instance I have an iPad welcome letter, or an EDU 654 welcome letter rather. It says greeting all students, and so I don't have to rewrite this 100 times for all the different students that I want, but I can put in some personal information and just plop it right into this email simply by picking canned responses and then hitting it, and it pre-populates this. It's basically for mass mailing, but another really clever one that I like using is for rubric style. So when I taught high school, and even when I teach now, when I want to put a rubric into my email, I can use assignment pieces like this, and it will put in my rubric with all of the content and the scores. I can change these before I send them off to the students, and then give them their point value right here. And by the time they get back to their seats, these are for my master's class iPad students, and they present, by the time they get back to their seats, they have their grades essentially in their inbox. And that's just some of the ways of using canned responses. There are tons of different ways of using canned responses, including you can write filters that actually engage canned responses, which is amazing to couple the two together, and it's really powerful. But you have to get used to filters first, then go to canned responses, and you'll be very happy with what you can put together. Now let's go back to the old, or rather, let's go back to the new style canned responses so I can show you how to create your very first one. To create your very first canned response, you actually don't go to canned response at first at all. Right here it just says canned response, new canned response, but you don't have anything to can yet. First, you type your message. So I'm going to type my message. Then I'm going to come up here and go canned response. And under the save section, I'm going to save this new response. There we go. New response. I name it new message. And I hit OK. And nothing, it appears, happens. Except for now, if I come back to my canned responses, you're going to see I can insert this canned response. I can save a new version of this canned response, or I can delete this new message. See how new message actually shows up 3 separate times in there? It's a little bit confusing, but underneath each heading, that's what it does. So in other words, if I click on the new message words underneath the word insert, it's actually going to insert that new message. If I want to resave some more information over the new message, I have to go under the save section and click the new message. And if I want to delete that new message, I go to the delete section and hit delete message. Like I said, it's a little bit complicated, but I'm going to try and make it make sense here by making one more canned response, and then we're going to edit and we're going to save some, and we're going to see how it works. Let's go to the zoo. There we go. So we'll call this the zoo message. Under canned responses, I want to create a new message, so I'm not going to insert anything. I'm not going to delete anything. Instead, I'm going to create a new canned response. Do that, call it zoo this time, hit OK, and now that's my let's go to the zoo. I'm going to actually completely get rid of this draft, and I'm going to start a brand new canned response with the letter C, which helps me create a response at all, or compose. And now I go to my canned response. Canned responses, I'm going to pick zoo this time. And I don't hit save, I don't hit delete zoo, I hit insert zoo. Like I said, there are 3 zoos. Zoo, zoo, zoo. I want to insert zoo. So I insert it, and there it is. There's my canned response. And maybe I want to alter this message. So I'll put now, exclamation point. Now, if I want to save this canned response all over again because I made changes, I come back in here and I do not go to delete it. I don't go to insert it. I actually want to save zoo, which seems sort of weird, but that's exactly what I want to do. I want to save over this, and it's even going to ask me, this will overwrite the saved canned response from before. Absolutely, that's exactly what I want to do. I refreshed or remade a new one, or I updated it, and I want to save over it. So I hit OK, and now I have a brand new canned response. That's exactly how canned responses work. There's one final thing. You probably want to see what it looks like when you delete. I'm going to delete the new message. It says, are you sure? I hit OK, and now that message no longer exists within canned responses. I have only the zoo message. So that's exactly how messages or canned responses work within Gmail, and that's a very slick lab plugin. Once you get used to it, it is a life changer. It makes things so much easier. I highly recommend you take a look through the rest of those labs, find some of the things that really satisfy the way that you want to email and the way that you want to function within Gmail. That's the end of this entire Gmail session. Hope you enjoyed. Have fun in labs.